It's a great pleasure to be having a chance to talk to Charlie Loke, our fellow at King's College, who I've known for many years and been on the same staircase with for some years and encountered in many contexts. So, Charlie, when were you born and where?
Date of birth is 16 December 1934, and I was born in Kuala Lumpur, which was the capital of Malaysia.
Now, I know you come from, or part of a very interesting family from that region. Could we go back as far back as you can remember, perhaps on your father's side first? So how far back can you remember on your father's side?
My father's side, I didn't really know my grandfather, but I know that he came from Kwantung province, southern China. And so his origin we know about. And he married a local lady, because in the old days they don't bring their women with them. So my father's side is well documented in that sense, that we know precisely where my grandfather came from. I don't actually, but many people do. In fact, that one of my cousins actually have built a hospital in his name, and his name is called Loke, so that we do know where the village is. But I myself, Loke is the surname, Yu is Y-E-W, and that's unusual because, as you know, Chinese have usually two other names. It's always Loke, Yu something, but his is rather strange, and that is he only had one name, which is Yu. And I am told that the reason for this is that his surname wasn't really Loke at all in the first place. His surname is Wong, and so that his surname is Wong Loke Yu. And for some reason, I think he discarded Wong. I don't know why that is, and therefore used the other two names, and it became Loke Yu, and Loke therefore became our surname, and he only had one other name, which is Yu.
Do you know why he left China?
I think that he left China for the reasons when most people left China.
When was this?
That must be in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and to look for work and things. And the story goes that he came to Malaysia with about $10 in his pocket, and he made all the money in his lifetime. So he came as a sort of indentured labor under the British government, and he built up tin mining and rubber industry in Malaysia during his lifetime.
That was his occupation as an industrialist.
Yes, yes. And then, of course, from there he bought a lot of land and became and owned a lot of houses. And so the property, tin mines, and rubber estates still, I think, remain the family assets as of now.
And this is around Kuala Lumpur, is it? Or?
Well, it started off around Kuala Lumpur,
Yes.
but then it spread to other states in Malaysia, spread as far as Singapore, and also as far as Hong Kong. But it's mainly around Kuala Lumpur and the environment, because when tin mines became used up, because in the old days the sort of open cast tin mines, and once it's used up, it's useless anymore as a mine. So what happens is that it's just big holes filled with water in the old days, and it's no use for them. But fortunately, grandfather had the foresight of converting many of these mines to other uses, like developing townships and things, so that from there he made a lot of industry going in Malaysia from disused tin mines. And in fact, we still have a lot of disused tin mines in the family assets. And recently we were debating whether we should sell some of these disused mines which have no use whatsoever. And fortunately, before we sold any of these things, they built this multimedia corridor in Kuala Lumpur, which therefore made these mines within the corridor quite potentially a very good investment. So we have not sold any of these disused holes with water. That's right. So that I think potentially they could be quite useful, I suppose, financially.
What was his connection with Hong Kong? I've heard something that he was connected with Hong Kong quite strongly.
Yes, one of his passion really is education, and he started what's called Loke scholarships to support candidates, particularly for medicine and for engineering. And in those days, there were no universities in Malaysia or Singapore, and Hong Kong had one, so that he had these scholarships going for.
From Malaysia to Hong Kong?
Well, yes, I think that a lot of the students came from Malaysia and Singapore to Hong Kong, but they're not restricted, as far as I know, to Malaysia and Hong Kong, because Hong Kong people themselves can use these scholarships. But unfortunately, these scholarships have disappeared for a while, merely because I think the capital died out during the war and things. So that one of the things that I would very much like to do is to resurrect some of these scholarships, and we are now having some discussion with Hong Kong University as how best to resurrect these defunct scholarships.
Did you gather anything about his personality? You never met him, I gather, but did you gather from your father or mother what sort of person he was? Was he a nice man, an interesting man?
I think he was a nice man. He was a nice man. He was an honest man and a determined and focused man. That's how I knew. So he wasn't devious, as far as I can tell. So and that's why that he got on very well with the British administration in Malaysia. They all trusted him to do things, and I think that must be the basic quality that made him part of the colonial system, as it were.
Did he play a role? Was he a judge or a magistrate?
No. In fact, no, he didn't actually. He didn't. I don't know whether it's just he didn't because of him. But I think in those days, in the colonial days, I don't think that any non-British people actually play a role in that kind of capacity.
And you say he married a Malay.
Not Malaysia. He married a lady from Malaysia, who again, but I don't know much about her background.
But she was a local.
Yes, that's right.
And how many children did they have? It's your parents' generation.
So that grandfather had 2 wives, I think. This is approximate. I'm not quite. No, he's not. No, he's not a Muslim. No, he's not a Muslim. So I think that this one.
Simultaneously or one after the other?
I think that most of the marriages in those days are sequential. Yes, I don't think that, unlike the Muslims where they have 4 together. No, so we have this one wife with 2 children, and then he married another one later with 3 children, I think.
And you're from the first marriage?
I'm for the first.
I see. Yeah. What about your mother's side? Do you know anything about your mother's parents or grandparents from that side?
Yes, my mother's side is perhaps more interesting background-wise, is because she comes from Penang, and in Penang there is a population called Baba Chinese or Peranakan Chinese who have been in Malaysia for generations. So unlike my grandfather's side, that we can trace back to only 3 generations that come from China, that the Baba Chinese in Malaysia have been there for years. So my grandmother, for instance, speak Malay and Hokkien. She wears what's called a sarong kabaya, which is a sarong and a top, and she chews betel nut and that kind of thing, which it's something very special to the Baba Chinese. And of course the origin of the Baba Chinese, because they've been there for so long, there must be a tremendous admixture between Chinese, Malays, because Penang, Malacca and Singapore, of course, is the main 3 ports for trade between the West and the East, so that there are in fact still enclaves of Portuguese, Armenians, Parsis, Jews, etc., who are all mixed up in that part of the world. And I think my grandmother and my mother's side is probably part of this big mixture. In fact, I think that in a recent book about Penang, it describes Penang very well, actually. That is that Penang is historically where the East India Company confronts Chinese civilization in a Malay world. And that's the mixture that we have from my mother's side, and therefore maybe looking at me, you will find that that I'm not typical Chinese in that sense. I think that probably comes from my mother's side, and whereas my Chinese features are from my father's side. So that even when I go home in Malaysia now, that a lot of people will mistake me for Thai, Burmese, Philippines, Malay, all that except Chinese.
Did you meet your grandmother, your mother's mother?
Yes. In fact, we lived in Penang for quite some time before I came over to school here. So in fact, I know Penang and my Penang side more than I know my Kuala Lumpur side.
Now, moving down to your parents' generation, are your parents still alive, or they?
No, my father died quite a long time ago, way back in 1970-something, when he was 72 years old or so. My mother just died last year at the age of 93. So I always feel that if longevity is hereditary, I just mean the 2.
Did either of their personalities have a strong effect on you, or is there anything about them that particularly influenced what you've become and done in your life?
Well, yes, I suppose so. Is it in the sense that, well, first of all, I was sent to school very early, so that must be in England, so that I left home when I was about 13. But even before I left home, I think my upbringing is, in those days, I don't know whether it's just our social circle, that is, we all brought up by nannies. Ayahs, that's right, ayahs, that's right. So so I had very little to do with my mother and my father. They come and go and they dictate things, but I think most of my time and my upbringing, really I was looked after by these ayahs.
What nationality or background were the ayahs?
Ayahs is the Chinese ones, what we call in Malaysia in those days called black and white ayahs, because they wear a white top and black silk pants. And those were mainly from China, and they sometimes come over. They're unmarried, most of them. It's almost like going into a convent. They have renounced marriage and things, and into a lifetime of service, and they sometimes remain for generations, look after generations of the same family. But they're gone now. I think that it's almost impossible to find a black and white ayah anymore nowadays, so that things have changed.
Did you, after you came to England, did you keep in touch with any of the Ayahs, or did they just disappear?
No, I think that I didn't, because my sister did with hers. And she's, in fact, I think her ayah recently died in China. They always go back to China to die. And my sister used to go and visit her and, and bring gifts and pay her money and things to look after her and things. So that they were very close. I was very close to my ayah too, but unfortunately for some reason, which I never found out, is that she was sacked when I was about, just before I came to England, And I must say that must be, that was the saddest part of my childhood. I still remember distinctly. I think I sort of cried for a week or more and never found out why she was sacked. And the suspicion is that maybe that my parents felt that I must be getting a bit too close to this ayah. It's about time to get rid of her. This was my suspicion. But I must say, I still remember. I think that maybe in my life that I can count that as one of the most, let's say.
Do you remember anything else about your first 12 or so years in Malaysia? Do you remember features of your childhood?
Yes, so good and bad. The bad, of course, is that I was there during the war when Malaysia was occupied. So that was bad. And so that I'm still quite young then, so I must be 4 or 5. But I can still remember the grotesque things, like everyone is living in fear, and even when you're so young, you still live in fear. You hide when the Japanese come around. And I remember heads being beheaded and hung on lampposts and things, and being slapped by Japanese soldiers if you don't stand and bow when you come across them, that kind of thing. So that wasn't a good period. That was just a period of fear. But after the war, before I came to England, I lived in Penang, and that was the most beautiful part of my childhood. I think it was a wonderful, idyllic childhood then, where I used to, we have a house on the beach, and walk miles on the beach. School is only in the morning, so for the whole afternoon I used to walk around the beach, casting and walk through some tennis and wandering in my room. In those days you're very safe if nothing happens to children. So I had a very natural, huckleberry Finn type of existence during that time. So I think that that part of my life was superb. Previous to that, during the war, was bad.
Has it influenced your attitude towards the Japanese at all, or a long time ago?
I think that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago, but I still feel that they are different from us in the sense that it's superficially we could be very polite, but deep down inside, I just wonder how they think about things. Yes, I still feel that. But there's no animosity at all now because it's too long ago.
And when you went for a long walk, did your sister come with you?
No. So in fact, actually, even in those days, boys and girls do different things. No, they never. So that I was quite isolated. Yes. It's a strange sort of social. It's a strange society in Malaysia in those days, and that is that we are not allowed to mix with a lot of people whom my parents feel is not quite right. Yes, almost, but not quite. It's not set in stone like the Indian caste. Layers of society in which you don't penetrate either downwards or
caste system based on wealth mainly, and class systems, or race? In other words, many British, for example, or many, I mean, which, and the famous division between the Malay and the Chinese, which side was that?
No, so that in fact it was, the caste system is within the race, because we never meet other races, really. And so we certainly don't mix with the British, and we don't mix much with the Malays either. So the caste system is within the Chinese, and that is, I think, mainly wealth, and it's mainly also that is old wealth. It's expressed in childhood, in command, for instance. Tennis player, or you're a badminton player, and the tennis player are the ones who come from old wealth, and the badminton is the new wealth, and never the twain shall meet. It's very funny, and that is, now that we've grown up now, and I go back and I have a lot of friends now who used to play badminton in the old days, and we used to laugh about it because they say that we never used to know each other when we were young, because we weren't allowed to mix. When we got older and came over to university and things, that this no longer applied for some reason. But it's a very sort of strange system. And of course the other system, the other manifestation, of course, is whether or not you go to an English-speaking school or Chinese-speaking school. So that also is a divide. I went to an English-speaking school. I went to, in fact, one of these Christian brother schools, which is there are quite a lot of, and my sisters went to a convent.
So you were a Christian?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was merely at school. That's right. You have to learn the Bible and recite catechisms and things. But no, so that no, we don't have to be Christians to be there. And I think that I was fortunate that actually, because it's one thing that I gained from these schools is that it's one of the few places that you actually learn Latin in those days. And of course in those days, to get into public school here, you need Latin to get in. Even O-levels and things, you all have to take Latin, unlike nowadays when it's hardly. So I was quite fortunate in that sense. If I'd gone to any other schools, I think it would be quite difficult to come over here and just start off as if nothing's happened.
Why did your parents send you to a convent?
I don't know. It's just that my father himself came to school in England.
He did?
Yes, he did. But he went to Aberdeen Grammar School for some reason. And in those days, there's a very strong Scottish influence, because all the rubber planters and things are Scotsmen, were Scotsmen. So I think he went to Aberdeen Grammar.
Where did you
I came here to in Cambridge. I think more or less been here ever since.
Was that just random that you went to Leeds?
No, in fact, that I was destined for either Eton or Harrow to aim to the top. And then my parents know a couple in Cambridge very well, the Burkills. I'm not sure if you know them. So Burkill, the Burkills. He was the master of Peterhouse, and Greta Burkill, in fact, was quite a formidable lady here. She actually founded the Graduate Center, and she was a founder member of New Hall, and so they were academics in Cambridge, and my father knew them very well. And seeing that they were going to be my guardians, they said that why send them so far away like Eton or Harrow, send him to school to Leeds, and we can look after him much better here. And they used to live in Chaucer Road, and I remember that we lived in Chaucer Road for many years.
Do you remember your first impressions of arriving in England or going to school in England?
Yes, and we arrived in London, and I still remember I was still a little boy in shorts, And my first day at school, I must say it was less traumatic than I expected it to be, because after reading Tom Brown's School Days and things, I thought that the first thing you would do would be whipped by senior boys and things. It wasn't like that at all. In fact, the lease was quite humane, and I remember standing there by the radiator in East House, which was my house, and new boys have to come the day before the hordes descend on the school. And another boy came in, a new boy, and said, "I'm Colin Kinnear. Who are you?" And I said that I'm Charlie Loke. And since then, nobody could actually pronounce Charlie. So that after a while, I think that the name Charlie gradually got given to me, and it's stuck ever since. So I still think of that first day at school, and that how benign it was, and how friendly this chap actually came and introduced himself as Colin Kinnear, who you, without bashing me up.
Did you remain friends with him?
Yes, for a long time. For a long time. So it's.
Were there any teachers at Leeds? Sometimes people are quite influenced by a special teacher or a special friend. Was there anyone at Leeds who had a big influence on your subsequent life?
No, I can't say. No, in fact there isn't actually. But lots of nice, very good masters who taught me how to play games. Because I think that in those days, I think all public schools are very gamey. And for that... Sorry?
You already knew tennis, but...
Yes, I knew. Yes, I played tennis, and then I learned hockey, and I played even rugby for the school. And then for someone my size, I think that's quite surprising, because I made the decision that that if you want to play rugby, it is better to play it properly in the sort of first 15 or second 15, because if you don't, you get landed up in the fourth or fifth 15, then it becomes a real massacre. It's because when you get down so low that you don't play the game anymore. It's a survival of the fittest. So I decided that. So I got into the first and second 15.
What position did you play?
I played wing 3/4 because I used to run quite fast. That's right. So I survived 5 years of playing rugby in school, which is without breaking anything or without suffering any harm. So that's quite good, I thought.
Yes. And did you begin to get particularly interested in any school subjects or extra school subjects at that time?
I've always been a scientist, and biology has always been
Was it one
my
along
subject.
the seashore in Penang?
Maybe, because I've always, in fact, wanted to be a marine biologist way back. But of course, in those days, everyone poo-pooed the idea and said, what's that? What's marine biologist? You have to have a career. And then I landed in medicine. It's because that's something which you have to do. If you want to do something biological, then you do something biologically useful. So I gave up the idea of marine biologist and did medicine. But my heart, I think I have to confess, my heart was really in it, and that's why that as soon as I qualified, signed my name in the medical register, became a doctor, I went back to research entirely. So I have never practiced. I've never really used my stethoscope in any useful way to patients.
So at school, did you do the scientific subjects exclusively? I mean, biology, chemistry, physics, those sorts of things? Yes. Well,
I think that for the sixth form, I think those are the three you have to choose. Yes, biology, physics, and chemistry.
Did you go back to Malaysia for school holidays, or did you stay here all the time?
I go back every now and again, but not every year. And then my parents used to come and visit me every now and again, and then we used to tour Europe and things. Yes, so I don't go back every single year.
Well, how close were your relations with your parents? It sounds as if it was quite a distant relationship because you've been brought up by an ayah and then you came to boarding school here. So were they sort of rather distant parents to you, or did you get close to either your mother or father?
No, I think distant. Full stop.
What did your father do? Did he carry on the family business?
Yes.
So he was very busy.
Yes.
So you're now 18, and you decided, it's just assumed you'd go to university, was it?
Yes, I think that, I don't know, so in those days, that's the normal sequence of events, that after school, you go either to the university or go into the church or go into the army or what have you, so you go somewhere. Yes, so I decided to go to university.
By this time, some of the theme of these questions is about identity, about Chineseness, Malaysianness, Britishness. By the age of 18 and 5 years at an English school, were you now feeling more, as it were, British or English than you were Chinese or Malaysian? Or did you still feel half and half, or what?
No, in fact, actually, I didn't feel anything then, because that I just live the life that's available to me. So I never question whether this life I'm living is more British or more Chinese. I think that question only has arisen recently after my retirement. No, I never questioned that. I just get on with it. And it just so happens that my life just became more and more, I suppose, anglicized. It's because I'm here, all the things that I do with here. And in fact, all my friends are British. In fact, I hardly knew any Malaysians. So gradually, I must have drifted without knowing that I had drifted.
And you never found any conflicts that either between the family systems or religious ideas or ethics or anything between your Chinese Malay background and your British? There were no obvious stresses.
Not at all. Not at all. I think that I suppose in those days, in Malaysia being an old colony, the British system already exists. So nobody questioned the way you live or the way or what religion you are and that kind of thing. So no, so that there was no conflict or whatsoever. And in fact, at home, we speak more English than Chinese, even to my parents. So the only time I speak a non-English language is to the servants and to my... So the servants always tend to be Chinese, so we speak Chinese to the servants. And then the chauffeur, for some reason, tend to be Malays. This is how... So you learn a bit of Malay, but you only speak bazaar Malay to them. And then things like the gardeners and things are always Indian, so they seem to have this categorized. So you speak a bit of Indian to the gardeners and things. But most of the time, I think you speak English in the house.
Did you apply to several different universities, or just... You came to Cambridge, presumably, did you? Or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, no, so that again that is chosen for me in the sense that my uncle, Loke was undergraduate at King's in the 1930s.
How do you spell that?
Loke Wantho, W-A-N-T-H-O. So that's my uncle. My father is Loke Wan Yat. So Uncle Wantho was an undergraduate here. And recently, as you know, he in fact endowed a studentship in King's. So he being here, I of course applied here. I think that it's chosen for me by the Burkills, because Mrs. Burkill and Daddy Burkill, of course, being in the academic system, know precisely where I should go. And to make things, I suppose, easier, too is that the senior tutor in those days is someone called Patrick Wilkinson, who was in fact a contemporary of my uncle's. So he knew my uncle, and in those days, that the selection is not as severe as it is now. So sometimes I do feel that maybe I did get him through a certain degree of nepotism. I'm not sure, but it's quite nice to.
Did you have an interview?
I can't remember. I think I must have had an interview and took some exams. I took some college exams and things, but I can't remember. Of course, that you pass first MB or something in those days, as well as A levels. I'm not sure, but anyway, yes. So that I got into King's again. Everything was arranged as a matter of course.
Who were your teachers when you were at King's? Your main teachers?
My main teachers, whom I remember very well, of course, is Kendall Dixon. So Kendall.
Al Dixon, the brother.
That's right. That's right. Although when I first came, my director of studies was a chap called David Stockdale, who's a natural scientist. Because in those days, when I first came, there wasn't such a thing as a medical sciences tripos. All medics come up as natural scientists because there wasn't a special medical tripos. So we are all under natural science director of studies. And then gradually I think Kendall took over, so he became more my mentor in my later years in King's and in subsequent years. And in fact it was Kendall that brought me back to Cambridge afterwards.
Can you say something about him, about either his intellect or his character?
Kendall was a wonderful man. I think that it's very difficult to describe Kendall. I think that he's the kind of person who cannot see bad in anyone. I think sometimes that everyone, no matter how bad, has an excuse to be so. I think it's so. So he's a wonderful man and very, very gentle and very good director of studies. And he can actually, he knows what is good for the students under his care. I think he has this perceptive nature that he immediately knows what's good for someone, so that his advice is always invaluable. And he just looked way back from the beginning, like after King's, which hospital should I go to, and I took his advice. I went to St. Thomas's Hospital in London. And in those days, that it's not as democratic as now, where the students actually decide where they go and even what room they have in college is under a committee and things. But in my day, you just at the end of the year, you go to the senior tutor who will say, right, next year, Loke, you will have S1 in your staircase, and you walk out and say, yes, thank you. But now, that you have this ballot system and things. And at the end of the 3 years, Kendall will say, right, Charlie, I think that you'll suit St. Thomas's very well. And you say, yes, Kendall, so you go to St. Thomas's. But now, as director of studies, I find my students coming up, arguing, debating which hospital they ought to go to and which one. So it's a different system, but I think that it worked very well, merely because I think you have to have respect for the person that's giving you the advice. And Kendall is to me, that anything he says, it's okay by me, it goes.
Were there any other either fellows or your contemporary students who had a big influence and remained friends? I mean, there must have been a number, but anyone you want to pick out from that time as an undergraduate at King's? I can't remember who would be Provost then. Shepherd, was it?
Provost Shepherd was yes.
And Patrick Wilkinson was around. John
Yes.
Raven?
John Raven was there, but I didn't really know him very well. I must say that I didn't really know too many of the other fellows. I used to know Dan Brown very well because he taught me a few things. And Hal, of course, I used to know. And but apart from those few, I didn't really know too many fellows in King's. It's strange in the sense that I don't know why that is.
And was there anything, I mean, King's has changed hugely since, you're talking now about the 50s, is it?
50s,
Changed hugely since the 50s. Was there any feature of it at that time that you particularly vividly remember? Was there much more collegiality or much more games playing or music or...
No, I think the main difference, of course, is that's the time when there was no state school pupils in King's. So we're all from public schools and things. And you come up with a lot of friends from your own schools, although they are scattered around other colleges and things. So life was easy in the sense that, in fact, there was hardly any change between school and university because you just have the same kind of people, the same people. So that is, I think, that is the main difference between then and now. But of course, then we have more traditions, I think, in those days. Like, I think one of the traditions that I feel sorry that we have discarded is that of dining in hall every night, and I think that that's a very good.
You mean as undergraduates?
Yes, as undergraduates, because now we talk a lot about community spirits and things, but we never know how to stimulate this community. And I think hall in the old days must be the way we used to do it, because you can come in and you can sit next to the next free place without feeling embarrassed about it, and that's how you get to know people. But now with separate tables and things, you tend to come in with friends and you leave with friends, and you don't have any friends to come in and leave with. Then I think you feel rather isolated. And I feel this very strongly once when I had as director studies, when I had a girl student for first year. I always see them before the first for drinks and things, and afterwards she lingered on in my room, and I said, why don't you go in for dinner like everybody else? And she said she's too scared to go in because she hasn't made any friends during the few days of matriculation, and therefore has nobody to go in with. So I felt that's very sad, because there was formal hall. She would have gone in and sat in the next empty space and nothing more would be said. But because of the separate table, she was too frightened to go. And so for several nights, I had to take her in myself and sit with her in hall. So that I think that that's one thing I wish maybe King's would bring back, and that is to just dine. But this, I think the resistance, of course, is that it may be expensive. It is elitist. People don't have time to all come in at the same time. But I think all that, can be cast aside for this one reason, that it creates a nice community once a day.
Yes, a lot of Oxford colleges still.
Do they? Okay.
Were there any, apart from work, were there any hobbies or sports or activities you particularly did as an undergraduate?
Oh gosh, I used to do too many sports actually. I think much to the irritation of Kendall. I think I played hockey for the college, and I played tennis for the college, and I was a tennis captain for several years. Used to play squash for the college, and in those days there wasn't a golf team in college, but nevertheless I played golf, and in fact so much so that I remember a letter that Kendall actually wrote to me saying that, Charlie, that I suggest that you ought to make some adjustment your lifestyle, because the way you're going, you never be able to do all your sports and get a reasonable tripos result. So I suggest that if you don't want to change your sporting life, then maybe you should change to a easier tripos, such as land economy. But I never. So I saw that I managed to squeeze in both, and I still remember that I was sitting next to Kendall when I was inducted as a fellow in the Beavis dinner. The Beavis. I think I was inducted as a fellow in 1972. I think, and then I told Kendall about this, and Kendall, being Kendall, was so nice, and his remark was, "Say, Charlie, I think I made a mistake."
So you then got your degree here, and you went to St. Thomas's. How long did you go for?
So 3 years. So it's 3 years here and 3 years there, and then you get. And in those days, you actually come back to Cambridge to take your exam, so that you get your MB Beecher Cantab at the end of 3 years. So that although you're down there for 3 years, you are still a Cambridge statue pupillary, as it were, even down there. But now it's different now that you go down and you left Cambridge, and when you get your degree, you become MBBS London. So you have cut off the Cambridge connection now. So after 3 years there, then yes, so I came back and did a year or two postgraduate in the Middlesex Hospital, Changeman Hospital. And then I went back to Malaysia to teach in the University of Malaysia, where they started the new medical school. So I actually taught the first batch of medics that graduated from the Malaysian medical school. And I was there for 4 years, in fact, actually.
Did you enjoy that period?
Yes, it was very good. In fact, that I had no intention of leaving as such. It's just that I came back to King's because I wrote my MD thesis, and after the MD thesis you have to come back to do your Viva, called the ACT, before you get your scarlet gown. And I came back to see Kendall and dined with Kendall. And I said to Kendall, I just got my MD, my scarlet gown, so very nice. I think I might go, now after my MD Cantab, I thought I might go and get the DPhil Oxon. Because there's an opening in Oxford for research position. And Kendall, again, his advice is that, Charlie, you cannot go through life chasing your scarlets. You have one already. Why go and chasing some more? There is in fact a assistant lectureship coming up in the Department of Pathology in Cambridge, and he said that that if you want to give it a try, so why don't you come back for a while?
What made you decide that you would do that? I mean, you just had enjoyed Cambridge.
Yes, so I thought I thought that I'd give it a try, because that assistant lectureship, and that was in 1967 or something. And I thought I'd come back for 3 years, nothing's lost, and then I go back again. And of course, from the assistant lectureship, I got promoted to my lectureship. And from the lectureship, I got tenured from the lectureship. And then Kendall retired. And he must have recommended me to take over from him, which again, I was surprised that took place. So I got my fellowship, my teaching fellowship. Then from there, I got my professorial fellowship, and as you know, that I'm now life fellow. So that I've never left, really, from then onwards. That I never had to think about leaving. It's because everything was so continuous. And this is what I found difficult now, is that all my life during my career, things have moved on, step by step without my having to actually think about it. It just happened. It's only after retirement now that I have to ask the question, what shall I do now? Where shall I go? Where shall I live? And it's quite difficult really now.
Just we'll get on to that in a moment, but your main work, your main research and your main interest is in, I'm not qualified to talk about it, but the word placenta rings a bell with me. Can you describe roughly what your research has been focused on and centered on over the years?
Yes, I work on the placenta, and I work on the immunology of the placenta. And the reason for immunology of the placenta is that during pregnancy, the baby really is foreign to the mother. And the question arises is, being a foreign organ in the mother, why is it not rejected like other organs, like kidney transplants and things? So why can nature do it so well, while clinical transplantation surgeons cannot do so without immunosuppressive drugs and things? So that's a major question that arose only in the 1950s, when people like Peter Medawar and things, when they discovered that transplantation rejection is actually due to the recognition of self and non-self, and it's the non-self that gets rejected. So why is the non-self fetus not rejected? So that whole concept came into being in the 1950s. So that's the reason why we work on this immunology, and why the placenta, of course, is a relatively recent thing, in the sense that it's not the baby which should be the main focus, but it is the placenta, because the placenta is the organ that divides the baby from the mother. So it is the rejection or non-rejection and the survival of the placenta which is of prime importance, not the baby. So that, that whereas previously it is the baby that people focus on, and that's why that we never got the answer. But now that we're focusing on the placenta now, we think that that's the way to go.
Are you getting an answer now?
Not yet, but I think we're getting very interesting answers, and that is the placenta, although it is fetal, it is a fetal part of the fetus. It is not exactly the same as the fetus. It has very special qualities that the fetus does not possess. And these special qualities of the placenta makes the mother's immune recognition of the placenta slightly different from the kind of immune rejection which is made by a transplant recipient for a foreign graft. So there's this analogy that Medawar, ever since 1950s, had brought forward, the fetus as a graft, is not entirely true, because the fetus has nothing to do with it. And the placenta is the prime focus. And the placenta is something special about it that makes it not exactly identical to a graft, so that the whole concept of the fetus as a graft has to be dismantled and dismissed, so that we feel that this on its own is a very important part of our research, that we have established, I suppose, a new paradigm that's been going on for 50 years or more now, and that paradigm has therefore got to be shifted before we move on. So that's one important thing, that the placenta is quite different. And the mother's recognition is also quite different from the model that other people have built up. And the mother's recognition also is very, very interesting, in the sense that in the normal recognition of a transplant recipient for a foreign graft, is the recognition of the presence of non-self. And that's why you get rejected. In other words, that is the presence of a difference which is recognized, and therefore you reject it. But in reproductive immunology, it is not exactly like that. And the recognition is not of non-self, but it's the recognition of missing self. And that is the absence of self, which is being recognized. So you can see that, therefore, immunological recognition, there's two ways in which we can recognize something as foreign. One is the presence of a difference. The other one is the absence of similarities. And this is the way in which it's more important to reproductive immunology. So that is a second important paradigm which is we have established in reproduction. So that although that we haven't found the answer why pregnancy is successful, along the way, we have dismantled some very old paradigms, very old models, and leading to new ones. So I think conceptually that's even more exciting than finding the answer why pregnancy is successful.
Fascinating. This is rather frivolous, but as you know, one of your colleagues who wrote a piece on you suggested that possibly one among many reasons why this particular problem of how it is that you have something inside you which is different and yet is accepted as one of you, this sort of intermediate category, the same but different within the body, has a curious parallel, some people might say an elective affinity with your own status as a Chinese Malay in British society, and therefore your emotional and identity position has a sort of similarity to your theoretical interests. It's as we I think agree, it's rather fanciful and can be overdone. But do you see anything in that at all, or is it just a clever idea?
No, I think it's yes, I think that it doesn't really. I think the analogy doesn't stand up to close scrutiny, but I can see that conceptually, it is quite clever in the sense that yes. So the placenta neither belongs to the fetus nor the mother, and stay there, and I neither belong to the East nor the West. So I think that I suppose if you stretch the analogy sufficiently, I suppose yes, I can see that. But I know the person who wrote it, and I think that very imaginative. But I think that not quite, a bit overdone.
On this last question of identity, I mean, you've mentioned to me that you've been back. You quite often go back to Malaysia in the hope that you will find there perhaps some identity and link with your past and with your family and with people there. But after a few weeks, you always feel you're a stranger there, and then you come back here. Is that a preoccupation with you at the moment, or?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So that I can't settle. That's what you mean. Yes, I can't settle, and I can't decide whether or not it is my fault or the fault of Malaysia. And maybe it's both. I think that I have moved on, and all the things and my friends and things there I know very well, but we have nothing in common anymore. So I do feel lonely, and I think that I can't remember who actually said that. I think the loneliness that you feel in the presence of friends, in fact, is worse than the loneliness that you feel when you're on your own, really, because I'm surrounded by friends, and sometimes I sit in a dinner party with a lot of them around, and suddenly I felt this sense of loneliness, because they are talking about things that I don't understand, and when I say something and I talk about things, there is a certain blankness about it. So that's the difficulty, and I just wonder whether or not it can ever be overcome unless I change, and I can't change unless I go back longer. So it's a catch-22 situation that I haven't given myself enough time to get acclimatized, and if I don't do that, I can never find a solution. So I don't know what is a solution.
What about here? Do you feel a sense of loneliness here? Or?
No, I don't actually. No, I don't. Therefore, that I wish the push from here is greater, then I will get back easier. No, the pull here is in fact, if anything, getting stronger and stronger and stronger. No, when I come back from Malaysia, that when I park my car in the back and walk across the bridge, and I look at my room in Gibbs, and I said, I have come home. and I feel irritated in some ways, and I feel that maybe I shouldn't feel like that. I should get that feeling when I land in Malaysia, and that I have come home, but it's not working out that way.
Well, that seems, the tape is just finishing, so that seems a rather nice note to end on.
Oh, good.
Unless there's anything else you want to say.
Not at all. So I think that I have rambled on, and I don't know whether my rambles are of any...
worthwhile, and they're not rambles, but it's nice that you feel you've come home. It reminds me, recently we had a discussion about the great Chinese poet Zhu Jimao, and his feeling that Cambridge was more dear to him and closer to him after 2 years here than the whole of China. And in his famous poem, Saying Goodbye to Cambridge Again, the longer version says, I feel more about Cambridge than I've ever felt about my own country. So you are in very distinguished company. So thank you very much indeed, Charlie.
Well, thank you, Alan.